Thank you. So thanks for the introduction. So I'm Burtch at Boston University. This work is joint with two others. One is BK Lee, who's at the back of the room, who's also at BU in my department, and Zichen Chen, who's a second-year PhD student in our department. And what we're looking at is how the availability of generative AI, or access to generative AI, specifically large language models, is going to affect production and consumption of user-generated content. But I think what we're looking at here is more generally, probably better characterized as trying to understand what are the implications of these technologies and tools for knowledge sharing and knowledge exchange. And you can think about when we're looking, Stack Overflow specifically, and Reddit as case study to try to understand where are these effects going to arise, how will they arise, on whom, to try to draw more generalizable insights. Of course, there may be some limits on what we can say. So online knowledge communities are obviously pretty important. The statistics are a little old because I think it's kind of taken as given at this point that companies have these things. So McKinsey has a slightly dated reference now that as of 2013, more than 50% of businesses in knowledge-intensive industries were operating some kind of internal online knowledge community for employees to leverage. They're important venues for knowledge exchange, peer connection, etc. So it's been kind of an ongoing issue since maybe the 90s with email, where people started seeing less of each other because they could use digital communication to contact one another. You have fewer in-person casual interactions as a result of that. And it got a lot worse with growth in remote work, which has obviously become a huge thing in the last few years because of the pandemic especially, that people have sort of scheduled interactions with each other, but casual ad hoc interactions are becoming much more rare. This is important because casual connection among employees or individuals in society, exchanging knowledge, obviously has big implications for not just knowledge exchange, but innovation within a firm, right? You get the spark of an idea from a casual water cooler conversation. It also has a huge implication for things like networking and learning and career growth, right? So as we get more structured in our interactions, and we're not talking to one another as people, some of those opportunities are going to go away. Okay? So firms are relying increasingly on these sort of digital tools to create more opportunity for peer connection and things within the firm, and also within society more generally. Right? So we have the open communities that we're going to study here. But the question is, are these things now going to be a bit under threat because of these new technologies? People may disengage from them, or we may lose out on something because of that. And it's not just about firm-hosted internal knowledge communities. It's also about online sort of open communities more generally. These are pretty important things on the internet today. They're some of the most important websites on the internet and the most heavily trafficked. So I pulled some stats 5 days ago, of the most heavily trafficked websites on the internet. And if you look at the rankings, a lot of this stuff is kind of expected. So we have sort of Google, YouTube at the top. Some of these have very clear sort of online community components to them. So Facebook obviously has Facebook groups. Twitter has sort of hashtags, X obviously. They need to update this website, so the rankings still say Twitter. It has sort of, econ Twitter, for example. It's another example of a Twitter, sort of a community on Twitter. Wikipedia is obviously organized around knowledge exchange. It is a community. And we have Reddit, which we will look at here. Now, more than 60% of companies have some kind of online knowledge brand communities for customers to talk about their products, like the SAP community would be an example of this as well. Okay? So it's not just about employees within firms, it's also about open exchange of knowledge more generally among people. And an interesting thing, if you look at this site, number 22, creeping up at the bottom here, is openai.com, which is obviously the URL you're going to hit if you're using ChatGPT. So it's popular enough now that it's the 22nd most trafficked site on the internet, which suggests something like it's getting tons of views, right? And how are people using it? Well, we don't have rigorous academic research about use cases, but if you look at industry surveys of people who are making use of these tools, number one use case is productivity enhancing things like writing emails and sort of drafting text. But 2, 3, and 4 most popular use case are brainstorming ideas, debugging or writing code, doing initial research on a topic. These are all very information-oriented and knowledge-oriented practices, and they're some of the most common use cases for these tools, which raises the prospect of, well, if I'm using this, what would I maybe have done instead had I not had this tool? Maybe I would have asked someone else for some information. Maybe I'm not doing that anymore. Okay, so we may see a reduction in people participating in these peer-to-peer connections as a result of access to these tools. Obviously, uptake is huge, right? So we had some estimates that like within 5 days they had 1 million users, and obviously it skyrocketed beyond this. For a little while, it was the most rapidly adopted software in history. Of course, now Threads took that over. They cheat a little by piggybacking on Instagram, but anyway, super rapid adoption relative to any other tool previously. It'll be useful to us in terms of a shock that we can think about as a discontinuity in what people are doing. And just to note here, something like an estimated more than 20% of employees in the workplace are reportedly making use of tools like ChatGPT and Bard, whether their company wants them to do it or not. Because even if they have a ban in place or an acceptable use policy, a lot of employees are saying, well, I'm using it anyway, I just don't tell my boss, I do it on my phone. Okay. So it's something that companies and organizations need to be worried about pretty seriously if people are disengaging in the workplace from peers. Okay. So I mentioned these already, right? So this idea that if we lose peer connections, we lose something around potential for networking and innovation and knowledge exchange, right, within a firm and more generally. There's also this secondary concern. We're not going to be able to say as much about this in this setting, although we will talk about it a little bit, which is maybe the information you get from these tools is not as good. Obviously, we know this idea that LLMs are subject to hallucination. This is an unsolved problem. It's a difficult problem. Basically, it's confidently wrong a lot of the time. There is some early research on this that has been looked at. Some people at Purdue had a very recent study that has not been peer-reviewed, caveat, but looking at what types of mistakes do these large language models make for coding problems. The majority of the mistakes they make are actually not like syntactic errors on programming problems. They're more logical conceptual errors. Why is that bad? Because if you don't know what you don't know, you get some code back, it runs, there's no error message, but it's not actually right. And you kind of go ahead, right? This is a sort of an example of a more general problem we might be worried about, that I don't know if the information I just got is incorrect. If I can't easily verify it, that's not good. Contrast that with, say, going to Stack Overflow, where I get an answer. If it's wrong, everybody else is going to jump on that person and destroy them. That's not really happening here. And that is very much the dynamic at Stack Overflow, historically. Okay? Okay. So I mentioned this already. I'll go past this just in the interest of time. I want to get to some information on what we actually did here. Okay, so our study contexts, plural, are Stack Overflow and Reddit. Specifically Reddit subreddits that are developer communities. So subreddits that are focused on different programming languages and software development kits and things. Stack Overflow is by far the largest community within the Stack Exchange ecosystem. Stack Exchange is a network of many communities focused on different topics. So Stack Overflow is a big one, of course. It's one of the most popular online communities for Q&A related to programming and technical tasks. Okay? And it's notable that this is not just like we're going to be studying Stack Overflow generally, that anybody can go to and use it, but it's notable that there's also a version of Stack Overflow that companies can buy for internal knowledge exchange. So there's some notion of generalizability here in terms of what's happening, the dynamic on this platform. It's plausible to be reflective of what might take place within an organizational community hosted on the same platform, right, that a company might be making use of. Reddit, you may be very familiar with Reddit. General purpose online community, actually lots of sub-communities. As I said, we're going to be focused on subreddits that are tied to specific topics which overlap with what we're going to be looking at on Stack Overflow, topic-wise, okay, to do a point of contrast with what might happen. And I'll give you some more intuition about why we want to do that contrast in a few minutes. Okay, so here are the questions we're specifically trying to answer here. So number one, once the large language models, and specifically we are going to be looking at ChatGPT, to what extent do users disengage from participation in these communities with the availability of these tools? And we're relying, like I said, on the very rapid shock and adoption of this tool in the general marketplace, okay? As a point of sort of it's a natural experiment. I'll explain our control group in a few minutes. We're then going to be thinking about, so we're thinking participation in the sense of like hosting activity, like content production, but we're also going to look at web traffic directly. So we have a bunch of proprietary data from SimilarWeb on traffic to lots of different sites. We can actually quantify drop-off in web traffic to Stack Overflow as a result of this shock. We're then going to think about, okay, prescriptively, we might want to think, when is this going to be bad for me? Like maybe, I don't care necessarily about the average effect, but in what setting? So like with what types of people might this happen more? In what types of communities or venues for knowledge exchange might this be more likely to happen if we do see a drop-off? because that may give some insights about how we should think about who should be worried and maybe how do you manage this. Okay? So specifically, we're going to look at where are these effects happening most topically, and we're going to specifically be thinking about an intuitive thing, which is topics where ChatGPT may perform better versus worse, just based on the availability of training data, for example. Okay? We're going to look at users specifically, and in particular, is this happening to users generally, or is it very concentrated among a population we would not want this to happen with, which is newer people? Right? I mentioned earlier that networking, learning, all these things that can be important benefits of participating in peer connection, and these are the people that are dropping off most heavily. That would be bad, right? Because they're the ones who need these benefits the most. And we have some reason to believe it might be these users because they're not already embedded in the community, so it's easier to get them out, right? They're not as attached, so they may drop off faster. And then we're doing the comparison between Reddit and Stack Overflow because there are actually some, and we kind of know this intuitively, that Stack Overflow is much more asocial than Reddit. In fact, they have a pretty strong ideology of this. There are guidelines that say you should not talk about anything in a Stack Overflow thread that is not about the question being asked. So it should not be casual conversation, or we as moderators will hammer you. We may remove your post. So they're very strongly about this is just about information. Okay? By contrast, Reddit is all over the place. It's known for being very social, maybe not in a positive way all the time, but people can kind of come in and say whatever they want, have conversations, and they're more likely to have some kind of social attachment in that setting as a basis for coming back. Okay, so we want to do this contrast if it's relatively social versus asocial community, or the effect's going to be quite different, and we'll show you they are very different. And then lastly, I told you can't say much about what's going on with the quality of the information that people get. The one thing we can do here, which we will do, is try to understand what's happening to the quality of answers that are showing up on Stack Overflow after ChatGPT comes out. There's a couple possible reasons quality could shift. Number one is the obvious thing that people might use ChatGPT to answer questions on the platform, and we have some evidence that's going on in the sense that Stack Overflow bans the use of ChatGPT outright for that purpose. The other reason that quality could go down, though, and the thing we're actually going to show some evidence for, is that as people exit the community, you're not getting that sort of long tail of knowledge where some random person happens to know exactly the answer to that question that got asked because it happened to them and they're the only one ever. If they're gone, that person's not there to answer anymore, so you can see declines in average quality of how people respond. So we're going to try to say something about the mechanism here, but we do show evidence for that as well, that quality drops. Okay, so I have 5 minutes. I'll pick up the pace here. So first, looking at web traffic effects, we have traffic on a daily basis over a long window surrounding the introduction of ChatGPT, which was November 30th of 2022, I believe. And it's for the top 1,000 most trafficked websites. StackOverflow.com is always in there. And so we're going to use a synthetic control to estimate the counterfactual and how much traffic would they have been getting had it not been for ChatGPT emerging. We're going to use synthetic control using Lasso because, well, essentially we have way more candidate control panels than we have time periods. And so we do some basically synthetic control using Lasso is sort of a feature selection approach, right? We're going to use pre-period data, identify candidate comparable websites that look very similar in terms of their traffic to Stack Overflow in the pre-period. We end up, it identifies like 8 or 9 of them basically, and forecast forward what the counterfactual would have been on the basis of finding a good linear predictor of a combination of like a handful of other websites. And what we get is this. So on the left, this is the introduction date for ChatGPT, and like it was right before sort of the Christmas break, winter holidays when a lot of people stop participating on Stack Overflow and then they come back in the new season. You see that our synthetic control is a pretty good counterfactual for what would have happened to Stack Overflow in the pre-period. They matched pretty well, so we're predicting pretty well with our set that we chose. And then in the post-period, we see traffic drop off pretty notably. And the magnitude here is we're talking about 1 million daily active users, okay, which is about 10 to 12% of the regular web traffic that they were getting previously. So it's a huge drop off in web traffic that we're estimating. This is the simple delta. There's no statistical inference here. This is just a point estimate of a delta going forward, okay? The true as opposed to the counterfactual we came up with. Okay, so people are disengaging. They're not even going to the site in the first place. Next, we're going to look at, okay, well, what's happening in terms of question posting volumes? So what we do here, now we need an actual research design where we need some control group, right? So what we do, we identify the 50 most common topic tags among questions on Stack Overflow, and then we construct panels of counts on a daily basis associated with each of those tags. So they're not mutually exclusive panels. We're double counting some questions across these panels, that's worth noting. But we get panels, daily basis, over time, around the introduction of ChatGPT. And then what we do is we go 1 year prior in calendar time, right, or in absolute time. And we take the exact same duration window from a year earlier, and we kind of bring it forward and pretend like it's happening today. And we call it the counterfactual. So time in our model is basically calendar time, not absolute time. And there's assumptions behind this, of course, that activity and posting volumes is pretty seasonal and regular, which it is. I mean, you can see it's bouncing up and down on a weekly basis here, like weekends versus weekdays is a pretty heavy cyclical pattern. But we can also test this, right? So we can actually estimate relative difference effects prior to ChatGPT's rollout in calendar time and see do they look comparable in the lead up to the actual treatment event. This is what we do. We're going to look at an average effect, but I'm going to show you relative time, what's going on after the introduction dynamically to these estimates. Once I construct these panels, I can do the standard difference in difference kind of stuff with a single shock, so there's no staggered treatments here. I can also aggregate average posting volumes per topic tag on a given week, and then use like matrix completion estimators to get another approach at this. And what do we see? So this is just illustrating our design visually for you so you really get what we're doing. And so we're bringing the historical stuff forward in time to serve as counterfactual or control. And we see, on average, about 150 fewer questions per topic by the end of our panel. I only have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to speed up here. It doesn't appear to be slowing down, right? So this is as of March 31st. So this is a few months in, and it was getting worse. Okay, roughly estimated 15% decline in daily traffic or posting volumes. And even heterogeneity, we can repeat those estimations, and we basically just do it by topic and compare them. And then try to correlate that with availability of training data for that topic. That's what we do next, average effects by topic. And this is what we see. So Python, JavaScript, React.js, the effect sizes are increasing as you go higher up the chart. These bars are showing you a scaled measure of availability of GitHub repositories I mentioned using that coding language or framework, as well as number of participants in the associated subset. So I'm just showing you these. It's very loose. This is not statistical. It's correlational. But there's an apparent association between availability of data and how big these effects are, as we would expect. Some of these are dropped in the middle, but like R has like R bloggers and other stuff, for example, that we're not picking up on in our data here. Okay, which users? So now I can go to the question level. No fixed effects in here, so this is relatively correlational again. But I'm just going to estimate, basically, using the counterfactual, we can bring it forward and do something similar, and we estimate the average number of days age of the user account that posted the question, and how that's shifting as a result of ChatGPT availability. And we see it's going up on average, which basically means new users are leaving, specifically. Questions are increasingly likely to come from older accounts. Lastly, we want to do a contrast with Reddit. So we find subreddits that have the exact same topic focus where possible, so there's not perfect overlap, and we compare. And we see absolutely no effects on Reddit anywhere. The average effects are zero, like basically null by topic and on average. And our argument is that Reddit is much more socially focused, and that helps keep people coming back, despite the availability of these other tools. So I'm out of time. I'm going to stop there. I'll just say that we do start to see some indications. Answers are likely to be systematically more downvoted or negative net mode after ChatGPT is available. Okay? And our conclusion is that this is actually because people are exiting the community, not because they're using ChatGPT. When we throw in a user fixed effect, these results go away. So it's not within users, it's across users. Okay, so I'll stop there, and I will open it up to questions. Thank you.